Did Solomon really have 1,000 wives? Some laugh. Others are scandalized. Many doubt it and believe it's an exaggeration or a symbol, not a historical fact. But behind that statement lies a serious question. If the Bible claims that a man of flesh and blood had 700 wives and 300 concubines, how should we understand it today? Was it a myth, a cultural hyperbole, or a literal fact? For centuries, theologians, historians, and specialists in the ancient world have debated this figure. How did a harem of such magnitude function in that era? What role did these women play in the international politics, economy, and religious life of the kingdom? Is it medically possible for a single man to maintain an active, intimate life with so many women over the years? And even more profoundly, why was this record preserved in Scripture? In this episode of Scrutinizing, we will approach this topic with historical rigor, biblical analysis, and current medical data, not to sensationalize, but to understand what this structure revealed about the heart, politics, and social reality of a king in his time. The story of Solomon is not a colorful detail. It is a warning, a mirror, and a reminder of how decisions can transform a kingdom, a leadership, and a life. Now I ask you, do you think this number was literal or symbolic? Do you think a man could really have had 1,000 women? Let me know in the comments. And before we continue, please like this video, share this content, and subscribe to Scrutinizing to receive more in-depth and well-researched documentaries. We began to scrutinize. To better understand the figure of 1,000 wives attributed to Solomon, it is necessary to begin with his origins. Solomon was the son of King David and Bathsheba, the woman who had been Uriah's wife. His birth occurred during a complex period in the family's history, but his destiny changed when he inherited the throne and received wisdom from God, which made him one of the most admired rulers of his time. During his reign, he promoted grand projects, including the construction of the temple, and transformed the kingdom into a center of wealth, trade, and diplomacy. His fame grew rapidly. Foreign delegations, merchants, and ambassadors visited his palace, drawn by his intelligence, his style of governance, and the splendor of his court. Now, to understand why Solomon had 1,000 wives, it's necessary to first analyze how it all began. The starting point is clearly described in ancient accounts. Solomon's first major marriage decision was to marry an Egyptian princess known as the Pharaoh's daughter. This marriage marks a turning point in their history. Egypt did not give its princesses to just any nation. It was a sign of recognition. It meant that the Pharaoh saw Solomon as a powerful ruler, worthy of respect and capable of maintaining a stable alliance. The biblical text records this fact directly. Let's read 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 1. Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh king of Egypt, for he took Pharaoh's daughter. Here's the key point. Pharaoh's daughter wasn't chosen out of love or attraction. It was a political move, a treaty, an international alliance, a pact between two powers. From this marriage onward, Solomon's married life adopted a diplomatic model. Historian Amélie Court explains it this way. In the ancient East, handing over a princess was the highest way to seal a treaty. It signified guaranteed friendship and cooperation between kingdoms. Archaeologist Donald Bruce Redford adds, marriage between royal houses was not sentimental. It was a political agreement that united territories, trade routes, and military commitments. Thus, Solomon's first wife was in reality an international alliance, and this pattern repeated itself time and again. As the fame of her wisdom grew, as her wealth increased, and as her influence spread to other regions, neighboring kingdoms wanted the same things as Egypt. They wanted to secure peace. They wanted access to trade. They wanted ties with an expanding kingdom. The result was a long list of diplomatic marriages with women from different nations. Thus appeared Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite wives. Each represented a political pact with her people of origin. But here is the most important point. This same model that strengthened Israel's foreign policy also opened the door to a spiritual risk. The text clearly warns of this. Let's read the first book of Kings, chapter 11, verse 3. He had 700 wives, queens, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. And further back, in the law given to the kings, there was already a warning. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 17, verse 17, he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he accumulate for himself great quantity of silver and gold. The marriage to the Pharaoh's daughter was not a mistake in itself. It was a political decision that worked, but it created a pattern that, over time, multiplied and exceeded the limits set by God. Now, inevitable questions arise. If Solomon was so wise, why did he fall into such a dangerous marriage system? If he knew the law, why did he ignore it? Was it lust? Was it personal weakness? Or was there something much deeper behind this decision? These questions have generated debate for centuries among historians, theologians, and experts in Near Eastern culture. Solomon's downfall cannot be explained superficially. It was not an impulsive act. It did not occur due to ignorance. He knew what the law taught. He knew the warning. He knew that a king should not have many wives. He was perfectly aware of the spiritual and political limitations of Israel. However, he chose a different path. Experts point out that there were three forces that influenced this phenomenon. First, international diplomatic pressure. Historian Kenneth Kitchen explains that the kings of the ancient East were surrounded by permanent political pressures. Marriage diplomacy was seen as the safest way to avoid wars and secure borders. When a powerful nation extended its hand offering a princess, refusing could be interpreted as an offense. Accepting her strengthened peace, opened trade routes, and guaranteed military cooperation. Solomon operated within this system. It was part of the political code of his time, as we already mentioned in the case of Pharaoh's daughter. Secondly, the pursuit of prestige and recognition. Archaeologist Donald Bruce Redford states that monarchs accumulated royal wives as a visible symbol of their international status. In the political language of the ancient Near East, each foreign wife was a diplomatic trophy demonstrating the king's influence over neighboring nations. The more alliances he amassed, the greater his power appeared. Solomon's wisdom did not make him immune to the desire for international recognition. Prestige was as valuable a currency as gold. Third, the cultural impact within the palace. Expert Mark Chavalas points out that royal harems were spaces where multiple cultures and beliefs coexisted. Each wife brought with her traditions, customs, and spiritual pressures from her nation. Solomon was exposed daily to foreign cultures, rituals, and political demands from within the palace itself. His home became a living diplomatic network, where each wife represented a kingdom seeking attention, favors, concessions, and even participation in ceremonies. This environment gradually eroded his spiritual vision while strengthening his political commitment to other nations. Now, when we hear the claim that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, doubts immediately arise. How could a man have relationships with so many women? How did such a large harem function? Was this physically possible or simply an exaggeration? Today, history, medicine, and archaeology allow us to answer these questions clearly. To begin, human biology specialists explain that men maintain their fertility for decades. Dr. Peter Ellison, professor of reproductive biology at Harvard, points out that male sperm production remains functional long after maturity, allowing for extensive reproductive activity throughout adulthood. This means that medically a healthy man can father children for more than 40 years without needing to schedule them regularly. There is no rigid natural limit preventing numerous pregnancies spread over time. But the key isn't just in medicine, the key is in history. The kingdoms of the ancient Near East developed highly structured polygynous systems. These were not improvised spaces, they were state institutions. Archaeologist William Wolfgang Hallo of Yale University explains that harems functioned as internal departments of the palace, with hierarchies. written records, and constant supervision. This means that the harem was a formal organization with strict rules and personnel assigned to specific tasks. At the top of this structure were the official wives, called queens. They were women of noble lineage, usually daughters of foreign kings. They weren't chosen for romance. They were living pacts, political agreements. Below the wives were the concubines. They did not have the diplomatic rank of a queen, but they were part of the monarch's inner circle. They lived within the palace, with rations, clothing, and care provided by the state. Many came from influential families or had been selected for aesthetic or administrative reasons. To maintain such a structure, there was a vast network of female staff. There were wet nurses, perfumers, maids, housekeepers, administrators, and female guards. The harem was a miniature city within the palace. Archaeologist Donald Bruce Redford, specializing in Egypt and the Levant, documents that the great courts included hundreds of women with specific roles recorded by royal scribes. Not all of these women had direct contact with the king. Not all of them expected to see him. Not all of them sought to get close to him. Access to the monarch was highly controlled by the harem staff, who followed a detailed protocol. Therefore, in practice, there weren't daily encounters with all of them. Not all of them lived for romance. Not all of them were part of the king's intimate life. Most were there as political representatives of their people. Anthropology also provides solid evidence. Researcher George Peter Murdoch, creator of the Ethnographic Atlas, documented that more than 80% of traditional societies practiced polygyny, and in most of them, leaders had access to large groups of women as a symbol of status, power, and diplomatic ability. In medical, anthropological, and archaeological terms, the conclusion is clear. A harem of 1,000 women is neither a myth nor an exaggeration. It is a phenomenon consistent with the political and social system of the ancient world. It wasn't about unrestrained pleasure. It wasn't about an obsessive king. It was about a diplomatic model who used marriage as a tool of power. Therefore, Solomon's harem did not represent 1,000 romances. It represented 1,000 alliances, 1,000 treaties, 1,000 cultural influences coexisting within the heart of the palace. It was an impressive structure in administrative terms, possible in biological terms, and perfectly consistent with the international diplomacy of its time. So far, we have seen that Solomon's harem was possible from a biological, political, and historical perspective. But the most important question is this: what effect did that system actually have on his personal, spiritual, and political life? The answer is not just historical, it is profoundly human. The ancient text declares that the women turned their hearts away. And here we find a powerful truth. These women represented more than just alliances. They brought with them cultures, ideas, and beliefs. They brought the identity of their people. They brought the religious practices of their families. They brought their altars, their gods, their rituals, and their worldview. Historian Amélie Court explains that foreign wives functioned as cultural ambassadors within the palace. Their presence ensured that the interests of their peoples never disappeared. This means that each of these women kept her nation's influence alive within Solomon's inner circle. And so, what began as diplomacy ended up becoming internal pressure. Queens' wives sought spaces for worship of their deities. Foreign concubines requested permission to maintain practices from their homelands. Children born to different women grew up amidst a mosaic of cultural identities coexisting in the palace. Archaeologist Donald Bruce Redford points out that royal harems were centers of political tension, where traditions, cults, and demands from different territories intertwined. In other words, the harem was not merely a female institution. It was a diplomatic hub charged with interests, requests, and expectations that revolved around the king. In this environment, Solomon's spiritual life gradually weakened. It wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a silent, slow, progressive erosion, a constant friction between his spiritual identity and the practices that surrounded him. Each wife represented an open door. Each concubine represented a cultural commitment. Each marriage alliance represented a small stirring of the heart. From a political standpoint, These women also had consequences. Maintaining so many alliances forced Solomon to accommodate external demands to avoid jeopardizing the treaties. Each marriage extended his network of influence, but also his network of obligations. More wives meant more diplomacy. More diplomacy meant more compromises, and more compromises meant more pressure. The king's children came from diverse backgrounds and cultures. This generated internal tensions, potential succession disputes, and hidden rivalries. In ancient kingdoms, the sons of different wives could become political threats or tools. This was the case in Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon, where harems produced internal factions that competed for the king's favor. In Solomon's case, the accumulation of wives did not strengthen his kingdom, it weakened it. The proliferation of cultures, gods, and expectations created an unstable environment in the spiritual sphere. And while the kingdom prospered economically, its spiritual life fragmented from within. The historical lesson is clear. The 1,000 women were a political triumph, but a spiritual defeat. They were a symbol of power before the nations, but a burden on the king's heart. They strengthened his international reputation, but weakened the very foundation of his obedience. The wisest man lost clarity not through lack of intelligence, but because he allowed his heart to split in 1,000 directions, one for each alliance, one for each culture, one for each influence that silently entered his life. Solomon's downfall was not due to a lack of knowledge. He knew exactly what was written. He knew the limit. He knew the warning. The commandment was clear long before he was born. Deuteronomy chapter 17 verse 17 says, "He shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. Nor shall he accumulate for himself great quantity of silver and gold." This text was part of the law given specifically to the kings of Israel. Solomon knew it. He had heard it since he was young. He didn't fall out of ignorance. He fell because he chose a different path from the one God had established. The marriage alliances that initially seemed useful for diplomacy ultimately became the trap that weakened her spiritual life. It wasn't a sudden mistake. It was an accumulation of decisions that ignored a clear divine principle. Historian Donald Bruce Redford explains that when a king allowed too many cultures, gods, and interests into his palace, the court became a hotbed of internal pressures capable of altering the course of the kingdom. And that is exactly what happened. Solomon knew what Deuteronomy warned against, yet he still allowed his heart to be divided. It wasn't a lack of wisdom. It wasn't a lack of information. It was a lack of obedience. And his disobedience had national consequences. After his death, the kingdom fractured. Israel split into two nations. The political legacy of the wisest king was marked by the rupture caused by decisions he knew he shouldn't have made. The lesson is clear. Knowledge does not save a man who chooses to ignore it. Wisdom does not protect one who ceases to obey it. And a divided heart ends up dividing everything it governs. And so we come to the end of this video. The story of Solomon reminds us that power without obedience becomes weakness, and that even the wisest person can lose their way when their heart is divided. If this content helped you better understand the truth behind this topic, I invite you to share it and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to continue producing in-depth, serious, and completely biblical material. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next episode of Searching.